Start of Chapter 9. Having reached Lahore, the next step was to seek help, but from whom? She could not return to the hostel, or could she contact Javeria or her other friends, since they were the ones her family would first suspect. It would not be long before her family would be in Lahore, conducting a search. For all she knew, perhaps the search had already been initiated. Going to a friend's house would only mean putting herself in danger. The only option open to her was Sabiha. But she was not sure if Sabiha had yet returned from Peshawar. As she feared, the family was still in Peshawar. "When are they expected back?" she asked the watchman who opened the door to her and recognized her from her earlier visits. "I do not know for sure, but they should be back in a couple of days," he replied. "Do you have the phone number for Peshawar?" Try as she might, she could not disguise the disappointment she felt. The watchman replied that indeed he did have the phone number. Relief flooded through her being as she followed the domestic into the house. She waited in the drawing room till the man fetched the phone number. She dialed from her cell phone. A gentleman answered the number and on her query told her that Sabiha was out but would return in a little while. "I have been unable to talk to Sabiha," she told the watchman. "I will wait here till I can talk to her." An hour later she was able to get through to Sabiha. Her friend was surprised to hear from her. As briefly as she could, Imama told her the full story of her leaving her house, but she did not tell her about her marriage vows to Salaar. She was not sure how Sabiha would react to that. "Your best bet would be to approach the courts," Sabiha advised Imama after hearing the whole story. "The law should provide some protection since you have changed your religion." "I don't want to do that." "Why?" "I had thought about approaching the courts," Sabiha, Imama replied, "but that is a course I don't want to take. You know my father and the position he has in society. The press would have a field day. My family would have to put up with much harassment. I do not wish that because of me my family should have to face hostility and embarrassment. In any case, Sabiha, you know what happens to girls who seek protection from the courts after changing their religion. They are sent to the shelter home. One might as well be in prison as at the shelter home. On top of it, the court case can drag on for years on end. The family can bring about one charge after another and thus prolong a final decision forever. And even if the court allows one to live freely according to one's beliefs, social pressure can still compel girls to return to their families. I have no desire to spend my life in the shelter home, nor do I wish to become the eye of the storm. I have left my house quietly and I wish to live my life in the same silence." "I understand your point of view, Imama," Sabiha answered, "but whether you like it or not you will have to face the storm you have raised. Your family will make every effort to trace you. And once they start looking for you it will not be long before they reach me and my family. While I would love to help you, and my family will too, but I know they will wish to do so openly and not in secret. My father will say what I am saying: you need to approach the law. I have no doubt that the courts will decide in your favor. In any case for now, stay in the house. I will speak to Dad about this. I'll also see if I can persuade him to return to Lahore tomorrow. Now let me speak to the watchman." Imama gave the phone to the watchman and after speaking to Sabiha, he put the phone down and said, "Sabiha madam has asked me to prepare her room for you. You are to please stay here till they come back." Imama went to Sabiha's room, but she could not rest. If anything, her conversation with Sabiha had only served to further agitate her. She could understand Sabiha's concerns. She herself did not wish to be a cause of worry to Sabiha's family, but she, for sure, did not want to approach the courts. She had no doubts that once her father, Hashim Mubin, were to find out that it was Sabiha's family that had helped her escape, he would regard them as an adversary and would deal with them as such. Perhaps this was why Sabiha was so adamant that she should approach the law. But for Imama, approaching the law was the tougher path to take. That the daughter of such a prominent figure of the community should forsake her religion would be akin to a slap in the face for the entire community, and they would react. What the reaction would be she did not know, but surely it would not be pretty. She was still pondering over these issues and she thought of Sayyida Maryam Sibte Ali. Maryam was a friend and class fellow of Sabiha's and Imama had met her a couple of times in Sabiha's house. In fact, she was the only one Sabiha had told of Imama's conversion to Islam. Maryam had been surprised and delighted at the news. Shaking her hand warmly, Maryam had told Imama that if she ever needed any help she should approach her without any hesitation. Whenever they met again, Maryam would always renew her offer to help. Imama did not know to what extent Maryam would really help, nor did she know why she thought of her at this moment, but contacting Maryam seemed the right thing to do. She picked up her phone to call, but the battery was dead. She plugged in the phone to recharge it and, coming into the lounge, picked up the diary to look for Maryam's number. Dr. Ali answered the phone when she dialed. "Could I speak to Maryam, please?" "I am her friend calling," she said. This was the first time ever she had called Maryam on the phone. Dr. Ali asked Imama to hold while he called his daughter. In a couple of minutes Maryam was on the line. "Hello Maryam, this is Imama." "Imama Hashim?" Maryam sounded surprised. "Yes, Maryam, I need your help." Imama poured out the whole story of her leaving home to Maryam, who listened in total silence while she spoke. Finally she said, "Where are you now?" "I am at Sabiha's house, but there is no one here. Sabiha and her family are in Peshawar." Imama did not tell her of her conversation with Sabiha. "You stay right there. I am sending the car right away to fetch you. You are to come here with all your belongings. In the meantime, I am going to talk to my parents about what can be done." Imama put the receiver down. She had not realized what a lucky coincidence it was that she had not used Salaar's phone to talk to Maryam. Had she done so, surely Salaar could have traced her through the phone company to Dr. Ali's house. Lucky too, that she had not once used the phone since reaching Lahore. Another lucky coincidence was that Dr. Ali sent his office car and driver to have her picked up, otherwise the servants would have recognized Maryam's car as she was a frequent visitor. Since neither the office car or the driver was known to Sabiha's watchman, no one would be able to trace her movement from Sabiha's house. Half an hour later, the servant came to tell her that a car had arrived to pick her up. Imama picked up her bag to leave. "Are you going?" "Yes." "But Sabiha madam said that you would be staying here." "No, I am leaving. If Sabiha calls, tell her I have left." She got into the car without letting the man know where she was going. She had never been to Maryam's house before and was unsure of the reception she would get. However, she was sure she would have to face a barrage of questions, and in the car Imama prepared herself. But this did not happen. "We have already had breakfast, but you must be famished," Maryam said as she came out into the driveway to greet her. She took her in and introduced her to her parents. Dr. Ali and his wife greeted Imama warmly. The sorrow and stress on her face moved them to pity. "I'll set the table for breakfast, Maryam. Why don't you show Imama to her room so she can freshen up?" Mrs. Ali said to her daughter. By the time she had changed and come out, breakfast was ready for her. Imama ate in silence. When she had finished, Dr. Ali said, "Imama, go and get some sleep. I am off to the office now. When I get back from work we can sit and discuss your problem." He left the room instructing his daughter to take Imama to her room. In the room Maryam said, "You are exhausted Imama, try and sleep. I'll get you a sleeping pill to help you rest. Take it if you feel the need for it." Maryam left the room. She came back shortly with the sleeping pill and a glass of water. "Try and rest," she tried to reassure Imama. "All will be well. Just think you are in your own home." She pulled the curtains, switched off the light and left the room. Although it was 9 in the morning, it was a foggy day, and with the lights off and the curtains drawn, the room was fairly dark. Imama took the sleeping pill. She knew well enough that she would not be able to sleep without this aid. She was far too fretful to rest otherwise. As she lay in bed she felt the tablet taking effect as drowsiness swept over her, and in a short while she was lost to the world. When she woke up the room was in total darkness. She got off the bed and groped her way to the wall and the light switch. She switched on the light. The clock on the wall showed it was 11:30 at night. She could not make out whether she had slept so long because of the sleeping pill or simply out of sheer exhaustion over the last few days. Whatever the reason, she felt refreshed after her long rest. She was also famished. Not knowing if the household was asleep or awake, she tiptoed to the door and softly opened it. Dr. Ali was sitting in the lounge reading a book. He heard the door open and looked up. "Did you sleep well?" he asked with a smile. "Yes," she tried to smile. "Now this is what you have to do," Dr. Ali continued pleasantly. "See that door? It leads to the kitchen. Your dinner has been kept for you in the fridge. Take it out and heat it. When you have had your dinner, make 2 cups of tea and bring them here so we can chat." Without a word, Imama did as she was told. Having eaten, she made 2 cups of tea and came back to the lounge. Dr. Ali had put his book aside and was waiting for her. She handed him 1 cup, and with the second cup in her hand, seated herself on the sofa opposite him. "This is very good tea," he said, taking a sip. Imama was so nervous that she neither smiled at the compliment nor thanked him. She just sat there and stared at him. "Imama, the decision you have taken is the right one. There are now 2 opinions about that. A decision like this requires a great deal of courage, but sometimes it requires even more courage to stand by the decision one makes. As time goes by, you will be more aware of this." Dr. Ali was speaking in calm, measured tones as he regarded Imama thoughtfully. "I would like to know," he continued, "if your decision to change your religion is based solely on religious grounds or is there any other factor involved?" Imama looked at him without replying. Since Imama did not reply, Dr. Ali continued, "Perhaps I should make myself more clear. My question is that, are you by any chance interested in a boy, and has he influenced you in any way to change your religion and leave your home?" Without waiting for Imama to reply, Dr. Ali spoke on. "I would also like to make it clear that if such is the case, I will not have an ill opinion of you. The only reason I am asking this is that if it is so, it will be necessary for me to meet the boy and his family." For the first time, Imama regretted that she had not thought of contacting Maryam and her family before she took the drastic step of marrying Salaar. Had Dr. Ali talked to Jalal, she dismissed the idea from her mind and shook her head in the negative in reply to Dr. Ali. "No, there is no such thing," she replied. "Are you sure?" Dr. Ali persisted in his calm way. "I did not embrace Islam for the love of any man," Imama replied truthfully, for indeed she had not accepted Islam for the love of Jalal. "Are you fully aware of the difficulties you will face?" Dr. Ali asked next. I am acquainted with your father, Mr. Hashim Mubin. He holds a very prominent position in your community. Your changing your religion thus and leaving the house will be a great blow to him, and he will do everything possible to find you and persuade you to return home." "I will not return home under any condition. I have thought about this very seriously and I have made up my mind," Imama replied firmly. "You have left your house, but what is your next step to be?" Anticipating that Dr. Ali would suggest that she approach the law for protection, Imama preempted him. "I will not go to the courts. I do not wish to be made a public spectacle. I am sure you will appreciate the problems that will confront me if I decide to take my case to court," she said. "In that case, what is it that you wish to do?" Dr. Ali asked, looking at her intently. "You know you will not be able to complete your medical degree if you remain in hiding?" "Yes, I am aware of that," she replied forlornly, putting her cup down. "In any case, I will not be able to pay the tuition fee on my own. What if you transfer to another medical college in another part of the country?" "No, that will not be possible. My family will anticipate that as my first move and they will contact all the medical colleges in the country. In any case, there are few such schools and it will not be difficult for them to track me down. Then? I would like to take admission in BSc, in some college in the country, not in Lahore, and I wish to change my name." Dr. Ali did not reply immediately. He remained lost in thought for a while, then with a deep sigh he spoke. "Imama, for now you must remain here. Let's wait and see what steps your family takes. In a few weeks we shall know. Till then I suggest we wait. You are completely safe here. You do not wish to approach the courts, and I respect your judgment in that. Stay here, till we figure out what to do next. Your family will not be able to trace you here and, even if they do, they cannot force you to leave against your will. No one will make you do anything against your will, please be assured of that. Dr. Ali tried to reassure Imama that she was safe and had sanctuary in his house. Looking at him, Imama was reminded of her father Hashim Mubin, and she went back to her room with a sad heart. It was 5 in the evening the next day when Dr. Ali came back from the office and summoned Imama to his study. The servant came to the kitchen where she and Maryam were to say that Dr. Sahib was asking for her. She knocked on the door and entered. Dr. Ali was riffling through some papers in a drawer. "Come Imama, sit down," he said. She sat on the chair opposite him. "I have made some inquiries today regarding your family and the search they are conducting to find you," he said. Shutting the drawer, he abruptly asked, "Who is Salaar Sikandar?" He was watching her intently. Imama was taken aback. She felt her heart drumming in her chest. The color drained from her face, a fact that was not lost on Dr. Ali. "Salaar, he is our neighbor, he helped me escape from home, he helped me come to Lahore, from Islamabad," she stammered. Should I tell him about my marriage vows with Salaar? She wondered. "Your father has filed an FIR, first investigation report, against him accusing him of abducting you," Dr. Ali informed her. Imama paled further. "Has he been caught?" she cried out. She had not reckoned on her family tracing Salaar so quickly, but that they had done so meant that they would soon find out about Jalal and then they would trace her to this house. "No. But they do know that he came to Lahore that night with a girl. He has admitted as much but denies that the girl was you. He claims to have come with a girlfriend and has already provided the proof." Dr. Ali deliberately omitted the fact that Salaar claimed to have come to Lahore with a prostitute. "No. His family too is not without resources and the police could not pick him up, but your family is convinced that he is the one who helped you run away." Abruptly changing the subject, he asked, "What sort of a person is Salaar?" "He is bad." Imama spoke impulsively. "He is very bad." "But you just said he helped you." "Yes, but he is not a good person. Perhaps he helped me because once when he had tried to commit suicide I had helped save his life, or perhaps he did it because he is my brother's friend. But he is not a nice person, he has a mental problem, he says odd things, does odd things." Imama was recalling in her mind the drive from Lahore to Islamabad and how Salaar provoked her the entire way. "The police have contacted all your friends, including Sabiha," Dr. Ali continued. "Sabiha is back from Peshawar, but Maryam has not told her anything about your being here. You are not to contact her in any way, not even by telephone. Her house is under surveillance and the phone will be tapped. In fact, for now your best bet is to lie low and not contact anyone at all." "Can I contact them through my phone?" Imama asked. "You have a phone?" Dr. Sidiali was startled. "It belongs to Salaar. They have tracked Salaar down, it will not take them long to trace the phone." "When you called Maryam from Sabiha's house, did you call from the phone?" Dr. Ali sounded worried now. "No, I had used Sabiha's home phone to call." "You are not to use that phone at all, neither to call nor to receive calls." He was somewhat relieved. For the next few days Dr. Ali would come home in the evenings and tell her about the development regarding her family's quest to find her. The police were questioning everyone she could have been in touch with and going to all places where she may have sought refuge. Medical colleges, hospitals, hostels, friends, colleagues. Hashim Mubin left no stone unturned. The only thing he did not do was approach the media. He knew that was a route that would lead to disgrace and disappointment. To whatever extent he could, he was trying to keep his daughter's disappearance a secret. He had contacted the police. His own community was aware of his predicament and was doing its best to help in the search. The police had contacted Sabiha's family, but they were not aware of the fact that she had sought refuge in her house on her arrival from Lahore. The fact that Sabiha and her family had at that point been in Peshawar threw them off the scent. Maryam too had not confided in Sabiha and continued to play the part that she too was confounded by Imama's disappearance. Having lived some weeks in the security of Dr. Ali's house, Imama was convinced that she was safe, that no one would be able to follow her to this place. She decided to call Salaar and ask for the marriage certificate. It was now that she was horrified to learn that Salaar had neither allowed her the right to ask for divorce nor was he prepared to divorce her. She felt the ground slip away from under her feet. This was the first time that she had used the phone since her arrival in Dr. Ali's house, that too to call Salaar and without informing anyone. She began to be aware of her folly. She should never have trusted a man like Salaar. At the very least she should have read the marriage papers or kept a copy of it for herself. As the realization grew that Salaar could become a real problem in her life, she began to rue all her earlier decisions. Had she ever imagined she would meet a man like Dr. Ali, she would never have committed the folly of getting married, and that too to a man like Salaar. Had she known that Dr. Ali would help her regardless, she would have told him the truth about Salaar. Surely, he would have found a way out for her. But now that she had so convincingly lied about the fact that there was no man involved in this enterprise, how could she back out of it? And then, that she was married to the very man she had badmouthed about, the very man against whom her family had filed an FIR with the police on charges of abducting her. Should she now come clean and confess everything to Dr. Ali? She feared if she did so she may lose the only refuge she had, and at this moment she did not want to do that. In her worry and apprehension, Imama lost all appetite, she could neither eat nor drink. The future seemed bleak and dark. As for Salaar Sikandar, she had developed such a hatred for him that if he were before her she would have shot him. A myriad of fears and anxiety began to prey on her mind. Earlier, she was afraid of her family, added to that fear now was her dread of Salaar. She did not know which way to turn. Always quiet by nature, she now slipped into complete quietude. She began to lose weight and became listless and lethargic. The change was not lost on Dr. Ali and his family. One by one, they spoke to her to find out what was worrying her, but she managed to fob them off. "What is the matter, Imama? You have always been quiet, but now you look as if a great worry is pressing down on you." Maryam was the first to approach her. "It's nothing, Maryam. Just that I miss home," Imama tried to make light of the situation. Maryam was not to be misled so easily. "Why now? You have been here for some time now, but it is only over the last few days that you have stopped eating. You are looking pale, you have circles under your eyes as if you have not been sleeping well and you have lost weight. If this goes on you will soon fall ill." Imama could not deny Maryam's observations. She knew that anyone looking at her could gauge the extent of her anxiety and perhaps also that it was due to recent developments. But she was helpless, she could not confide in Maryam about Salaar, nor could she confess to her marriage with Salaar. Again she tried to put Maryam off. "I have been thinking more of my family lately. The more time passes, the more I seem to miss them," she said softly, nor was this a complete lie because she was missing them intensely. She had never been separated from her family for such a length of time. True, she lived in a hostel in Lahore, but she made it a point of going home at least once a month. Her father or brother would also often drop by to see her, and then there was the telephone. She spoke to her folks nearly every day. But now she felt as if she was adrift on an endless sea with no one in sight. Those beloved familiar faces were now hers only in her mind and in her imagination. Maryam, seeing that Imama was not willing to share her fears with her, changed the subject and began to prattle on about other things, hoping to distract her from whatever it was that was worrying her. Dr. Ali was blessed with 3 daughters. Maryam was the youngest of the 3 and was completing her medical studies. The 2 older sisters were married and living in cities other than Lahore. Incidentally, soon after Maryam came to Dr. Ali's house, the sisters came home one by one to visit the parents. Maryam found in both sisters the same love and kindness that she had come to associate with Dr. Ali and his family, but on both occasions she was greatly reminded of her own sisters and the love and affection they had lavished on her. She thought of her home, her father, her older brother, Wasim, and Saad. Saad, who was not related to her by blood. Saad had been adopted in keeping with her community's practice of adopting homeless boys and by giving them security and love, creating a new member for the community. In keeping with this principle, Hashim Mubin had adopted Saad when he was very little and Imama was in her last year of school. The coming of a stranger into her house had been a new experience for Imama. We have adopted Saad as an expression of our gratitude to Allah, who has given us so much. By doing this we hope to establish a chain of kindness, her mother had explained to Imama on the day she brought Saad home. You should regard him as your younger brother. Imama was very proud of her parents that day, that they were willing to share the blessings God had given them with those less fortunate than them. She did not stop to think that her uncles had done the same as had some other prominent families she knew. It was only much later that the true nature of these adoptions came to light. Saad and Imama shared a bedroom and, from the very beginning, Saad became attached to her. Once Imama joined medical college and accepted Islam, she began telling Saad stories about the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, on her trips home for the weekend. Since Saad was too young to reason, she would simplify her rationalization by saying, as God is one, our Prophet, peace be upon him, too is unique. There is no one like him and there can be no one like him. While talking to Saad she would always ask him to not repeat their conversations to the rest of the family, but she well knew that would not happen. She was aware that Saad was already deeply influenced by the family and the community, and by the regular religious gatherings he attended. She had also thought that once she completed her education and started living her own life, she would take Saad with her, though again she was well aware that that would not be an easy thing to do. When leaving home, she had contemplated taking Saad with her, but she knew that such a step would increase the danger of her getting caught. Albeit many times since she had found shelter in Dr. Ali's house, she wondered if she could have brought Saad along. Although she had broken off ties with her family and was determined to pursue the path she had chosen for herself, this did not in any way diminish the love she still felt for them or for Jalal. All night in the privacy of her room she would cry for them. Initially, no one knew how unhappy she was. When she would appear at the breakfast table with swollen eyes, she would shrug off the host's concern by saying she had a sleepless night. However, one night Maryam came into her room unexpectedly. Since it was very late, Maryam, assuming that Imama would be asleep, did not knock on the door. Imama was in bed but not asleep, wrapped in a blanket. She had been crying with a deep anguish born of hopelessness. As Maryam turned the handle to enter, Imama quickly covered her face with the blanket. The movement alerted Maryam to the fact that Imama was not sleeping. Imama? No reply. Imama, are you awake? Maryam walked to the bed and pulled the blanket off Imama's face. She was horrified to see Imama's tear-stained face. Imama! No wonder you look so exhausted. Making up her mind in a minute, she pulled Imama off the bed. No more sleeping alone and worrying. You are to sleep in my room from now on, she said determinedly. Quietly Imama followed Maryam to her room. She was too ashamed to say anything. From that day on Imama slept in Maryam's room. As a result, she stopped crying in the nights, but she still had no control over sleep, and there were still nights when she lay sleepless till the early hours of mornings. When she would look at the medical books in Maryam's room, Imama would be filled with a deep melancholy. She knew she had left that life far behind and there was no return to it. In the mornings, once Dr. Ali would leave for work and Maryam for college, Imama would go and spend time with Mrs. Ali, whom she called Auntie. Or perhaps it was the other way around. Perhaps it was Auntie who would not leave Imama alone. She kept her busy all day so she would not have time to brood. Despite Auntie's efforts, there were times when Imama would fall into a reverie oblivious to the world around her. She made no effort to get in touch with Salaar again. She knew nothing would come of it except an increase in her worries. 3 months had passed since she had come to stay with Dr. Ali and family. One day he called her to his study. Imama, it has been a while now since you left home. Your family, while not having given up the search, has lessened their efforts to locate you. Have you given any thought as to what you would like to do next? He asked. I would like to continue my studies, Imama replied quietly. Dr. Ali considered her reply. Overlooking her answer he asked. Have you given any thought to your marrying? Marry? I do not understand. Imama stuttered, completely taken aback by the question. Given your circumstances, the best way out of this situation would be marriage. If you were to marry into a nice family, it would provide you with the security you so lack now. Dr. Ali broached the subject that was obviously on his mind. I know a few boys from very good families, I wish for you to marry one of them." All color drained from her face, Imama watched Dr. Ali. It was the same conclusion she had come to so many months ago, the thought that had led her to Salaar Sikandar and to folly. Had she not been married to Salaar, she would have accepted Dr. Ali's proposal with alacrity. She understood that marrying into a well-established family would give her sanctuary from many problems she now faced. She had always lived a sheltered life depending on her family for all her needs. It frightened her that now she had no one to turn to. How long could she go on like this? But her hasty marriage to Salaar was like a bone stuck in her throat, she could neither spit it out nor swallow it. "No, I will not marry." "Why not?" She had an answer to Dr. Ali's question but not the courage to give it. What would Dr. Ali think of her if she said the truth, that she was a liar and had been living in his house for so long under false pretenses? Or, perhaps he would think that she left her house in order to marry Salaar and all the rest of it was a pack of lies. And what if, on knowing the truth, he refused to help her any further, or asked her to leave the house, then what? Or what if he decided to contact her parents? She had lived for 3 months in Dr. Ali's house and she had realized he was a good and kind person, but she herself was too scared, too intimidated by her circumstances to put implicit trust in anybody. She could not afford to run the risk of trusting anyone so completely. She had reached a conclusion: she could not let anyone into her secret. "I would rather finish my studies first. I do not wish to be a burden on anyone, I want to stand on my own feet. If after getting married there are issues, I want to be able to support myself. There is no way of knowing how things will be after marriage, I may not have the opportunity to study." Imama spoke at length after a long silence. "Imama, we will always be there to help you. We do not plan to cut ties with you if you get married. We are not trying to get rid of you. For me you are like my own daughter, my fourth daughter." Imama's eyes welled up. "I am not putting any pressure on you, Imama. This was only a suggestion. Let a few years pass and I will marry whoever you tell me to. But not now, not immediately." Imama spoke aloud, but in her mind she was thinking, "For now, I have to get rid of Salaar. I must find a way to get a divorce. Which city would you like to study in?" Dr. Ali dropped the idea of marriage. "Anywhere, I have no preference," Imama replied. When she had left her house, Imama had taken all her documents, plus as much of her jewelry as she could. When Dr. Ali called her a few days later to inform her that he had decided to admit her to a college in Multan, she went to her room and fetched a small bag from her suitcase. She returned to Dr. Ali's study and opening the bag took out the envelope containing the necessary documents and handed it to Dr. Ali. Then she took out another small container from the bag and put it on the table. "This is some of my jewelry that I have with me. It is not much, but if I sell it, it can cover the cost of my education for some time," she said. "No. Don't sell the jewelry, you will need it when you get married. As far as your education goes, I am responsible for you and it is my responsibility to take care of your needs." About to say something more, Dr. Ali stopped suddenly, startled by something he saw gleaming in the open bag in Imama's hand. Slightly ashamed of herself for hiding it from him, Imama pulled out the little pistol out of the bag and put it on the table. "This belongs to me. I brought it from home. As I had said earlier, I needed Salaar's help and he is not a good man." She was unwilling to give more information than this. "Do you know how to use it?" Imama gave a sad smile. "Yes, I had trained with the NCC in college. Also my brother Wasim used to go the rifle shooting club regularly and I would often go with him. I had begged my father to buy me this pistol. It is gold-plated." Dr. Ali picked up the pistol. "Do you have a license for this?" he asked. "Yes, but I did not bring it with me." "In that case, leave it here with me. Do not take it with you to Multan. As for the jewelry, let's put it in a locker." Imama nodded her head in agreement. A few months later Imama found herself in Multan. A city she had never even given a second thought to in her life. But then so much had happened to her that she never imagined could happen. Could she ever have imagined that at the age of 20, she would be restarting her studies, this time with a view to taking a B.Sc degree, at an age when most girls have completed their B.Sc? Could she ever have imagined that she would have willfully abandoned her desire to be a doctor? Could she ever have imagined that she would be the cause of so much hurt and humiliation for her parents? Could she ever have imagined any other man in her life other than Jalal, and that she would be so desperate to marry that man? Could she ever have imagined, given her failure to marry the man of her choice, that she would end up marrying a man like Salaar Sikandar? And that too of her own volition? Could she ever have imagined that having given up the security and comforts of her own house she would end up with a family as kind and caring as Dr. Ali's? She had no experience of the outside world, and she had had no need of it either. When she left home, she had prayed earnestly for her own safety, that she may not need to go from pillar to post in her struggle for survival. She was not bold enough to fend for herself and take on the odds. She really did not know that she would now have to manage everything on her own, or how she would deal with strange men and all kinds of people, and that too when she had no family to fall back on. It was a different matter to study in a medical college in Lahore and dream of going abroad for higher studies, when in the protective shade of one's family. There were no financial issues, and Hashim Mubin's name and reputation were sufficient to ward off unwanted attention, persuading people to approach her with due respect. She was lucky that on leaving home she did not have to face the kind of problems she had feared. Salaar Sikandar had dropped her to Lahore and Dr. Ali's family had given her sanctuary. Since she had been at Dr. Ali's, she was fortunate that all concerns, big or small, were taken care of. Her change of name, admission in college in Multan, a place to stay in the hostel, the expenses involved with her education, all had been handled by Dr. Ali, and she was profoundly grateful to God for it. At least she did not have to face the daily strife for survival in a hostile world. She left for Multan. This was the beginning of a new life for her. A difficult life. She felt herself all alone in the hostel. Sometimes she would miss her family and the home in Islamabad with such intensity that it took all her willpower to stay where she was and not run back to them. Often she would cry for no reason at all. Sometimes she thought of getting in touch with Jalal. She still longed for him. A number of girls who were studying with her were those who wished for admission in medical colleges but who failed to get the required grades in their F.Sc exams. They were now sitting for their B.Sc in the hopes of doing better and entering the field of their choice. Medical college, doctor. For a long time these words were like daggers twisting in her heart. She would look at lines etched in her hands in amazement. What was it in her fate that was turning to dust all that she cherished? Often she would recall her conversation with Javeria. "If I cannot be a doctor, I have no wish to live, I will die," she had said. But she had not died. She continued to live. "I will be the country's most renowned eye specialist," she had declared. It had all remained a dream. All that she was so close to achieving had remained so far. She had no home. She had no family. S.A.W was not hers. She was not going to be a doctor. Jalal was not hers. In one sweep, she had lost all the comforts of life that she was used to, yet she lived. Imama could never have imagined that she had or could ever have had the courage to live thus of her own will, and yet she had proved herself at every moment. As time passed, the sense of loss decreased. She was finding in herself strength to bear the tribulations in her life. After God, it was Dr. Ali and his family who did all they could to help her recover. Once a month, she would visit them on a weekend. They regarded her as part of their family. What would have happened to me had I not met them? Imama often wondered. Imama was unable to get Salaar out of her mind during her long stay in Multan. She wanted to call him and again ask him to divorce her, and, if he still refused, she resolved to reveal all to Dr. Ali. Thus, once her B.Sc exams were over, she went to a public call office, PCO, and rang up Salaar. It was long since she had stopped using the cell phone Salaar had given her. Since that was Salaar's own number, she wondered if he had restarted using it for himself, or whether he was using the new number he had given her to call him those 2 years ago. With great trepidation, she rang both numbers in turn but got no reply to either. He obviously had a new number for his cell, but since she did not have it she could not contact him. Having no choice, she called his home number. The bell rang, then somebody picked it up and a woman's voice said, "Hello." "Hello. I wish to speak to Salaar Sikandar," Imama said. "Salaar, sir, who is this calling?" Imama realized that whoever was on the other end was suddenly suspicious. The voice was familiar, but she could not place it. Before Imama could speak, the woman at the other end spoke with great enthusiasm. "Imama sis, is that you, Imama sis?" Imama felt a thrill of fear run through her. Inadvertently, she dropped the receiver into the cradle, disconnecting the line. Who could it be who had recognized her so quickly merely by her saying those few words? And that too in Salaar's house? She remained rooted to her spot in fear. Her hands were trembling. Sitting in the inner booth of the PCO, she tried to reassure herself. "I have nothing to fear. I am so far from Islamabad, no one can trace me here. I have nothing to fear." Gradually she recovered her composure. Having convinced herself that she had nothing to fear, she gathered her courage to call again. She asked the owner of the PCO to connect her to the same number again. Somebody picked up the phone immediately. A man's voice greeted her. It was not Salaar. She would have recognized his voice. "I wish to speak to Salaar Sikandar," she said. "Is this Imama Hashim?" The voice at the other end was gruff and unfriendly. "Yes." Imama remained unruffled this time. There was complete silence at the other end. "Can I speak to him, please?" Imama repeated her request. "That is not possible," the man finally replied. "Why not?" "He is no longer alive." "What? Is he dead?" Imama could not stop herself asking. "Yes." "When?" There was a prolonged silence at the other end. Then the man spoke. "When was the last time you were in contact with him?" "Some years ago, about 2.5 years ago. He died a year ago." "You?" Imama disconnected the line. There was no need to hear any more. She was free. She knew that it was wrong to rejoice over the death of any human being, but she could not help it. Had Salaar divorced her when she had asked him to do so, she would undoubtedly have mourned his death. But now, 2 years later, she felt remarkably light, a sense of relief. The sword of Damocles which had been hanging over her head had been removed. There was no need to broach the subject with Dr. Ali. She was free in the real sense of the word. It was her last day at the hostel, and that night she prayed for forgiveness for Salaar's soul. As it was, she had forgiven him when she learnt of his death, but she could not mourn his death. She was immeasurably relieved over the turn events had taken. The woman Imama had spoken to was Parveen, who worked both at Salaar's house as well as at Imama's. She had recognized Imama's voice the minute she spoke. When Imama cut off the phone line, she went to Sikandar in a state of great excitement. It was just a quirk of fate that Sikandar was home that day. He had been unwell in the morning and had not gone to work. "A girl called a little while ago. She wanted to talk to Salaar," the maid said to Sikandar. "Well, tell him." Sikandar was indifferent. By yet another twist of fate, Salaar was there too. He was visiting from America, and was home at the time. The maid was flustered. "Sir, it was Imama sis calling," she said. Sikandar almost dropped the cup of tea he was holding. "Imama Hashim? Hashim Mubin's daughter?" Parveen nodded her head in confirmation. "So has Salaar been lying all this time when he says he has no connection with Imama?" he thought, his mind awhirl. Aloud he said, "Did she say she was Imama calling?" "No, sir, I recognized her voice. And when I asked her, she put the phone down on me." The phone rang again. Before the maid could pick up the phone, he reached for the extension in his room. The girl on the other end confirmed she was Imama. She also said that she had not been in touch with Salaar for over 2.5 years. While there was no way he could confirm what she was saying was the truth, his instinct told him the girl was not lying. "If only I can keep her away from contacting Salaar, we will have rid ourselves forever of a great deal of trouble," the thought ran through his mind. And so he told her that Salaar had died. For Sikandar, the year Imama had disappeared has been a difficult one. Suspecting Salaar in the disappearance of his daughter, Hashim Mubin had brought all sorts of pressure to bear on Sikandar. The bills for his firms that had always been easily passed through in government offices were now inexplicably delayed. He began to receive threatening letters and phone calls from anonymous callers. Near strangers would talk to him threateningly, telling him to assist in the return of Hashim Mubin's daughter. For a long time Salaar had been shadowed, and this harassment had not stopped even after he had been sent abroad. Even in America, Salaar remained under surveillance until Hashim Mubin was finally convinced that Imama and Salaar were not in contact with each other. With no proof of Salaar's involvement in Imama's disappearance, the harassment finally ceased. Numerous attempts made by Sikandar to re-establish good relations with Hashim Mubin were rebuffed, but at least the threat to him and his family had ceased. And now 2.5 years on, this girl was trying to get in touch with Salaar again. He did not want to go through all those hassles again, nor did he wish that for Salaar. Had he himself not been a man of means, just as Hashim Mubin was, the latter could have caused him even more problems than he had faced in the first few months. He was anxious to send Imama a copy of the divorce deed he had prepared on behalf of Salaar. That the deed was a forgery and that Salaar had no knowledge of it was of no consequence. He just wanted to make it clear to Imama that she had no connection to the family, and nor could she expect one. Had there been a connection, however tenuous it may have been, it was now snapped with the news of Salaar's death. It was a coincidence that Imama had put down the phone before hearing him out. He tried to trace the call and learnt that it was from a PCO in Multan. There was still a week to go before Salaar left for the United States. Sikandar decided to keep a strict eye on all his movements. Without his knowing it, Salaar was continuously watched for the last week of his stay in Pakistan. All his phone calls were monitored, and the servants were instructed not to let any calls through to him, no matter who had called. The maid was strictly warned not to let Salaar know that Imama had called. When Salaar left for America a week later, Sikandar breathed a sigh of relief. The danger had passed. On her return to Lahore, Imama sold the cell phone, since there was no way she could now return this to Salaar. To the cash she received she added some more money to cover the costs of the phone bills she would have incurred 2.5 years ago, plus the amount Salaar must have spent on her, driving her to Lahore, and other miscellaneous costs. All this cash she posted to Sikandar in Islamabad, along with a short note explaining why she was sending the money. Thus she paid off any money she may have owed Salaar and put herself out of an obligation to him. Sikandar was relieved at receiving the small packet. It convinced him that Imama was cutting off all ties with him, and also that she did not doubt his story. On finishing her BSc, Imama returned to Lahore from Multan. It was now 3 years since she had left home. She was convinced that the search for her was now not as intense as it may have been some years previously. At the most, her family would still be watching medical colleges. Her assumption was correct. Although more sure of herself now, she did not lower her vigilance. She took admission in the Punjab University in the chemistry department and registered for her MSc. In Multan, she had only worn a dupatta to and from college, but now she took to wearing a veil which covered her face too. After all, this was Lahore and somebody could recognize her. On her return to Lahore she did not take stay with Dr. Ali, instead she started living with Saida Auntie. Dr. Ali had introduced Imama to Saida Auntie before she went to Multan. The reason was that Saida Auntie had many relatives living in Multan, and Dr. Ali felt that Imama would be able to contact them in any emergency. An extremely garrulous and active woman of about 65 to 70 years of age, Saida Auntie lived alone in a large house in the inner city of Lahore. She had been widowed some years earlier. Both her sons had gone abroad to study, and on completing their education, they had married and opted to live abroad. Numerous attempts to persuade their mother to shift in with them had failed, and now the sons took turns to visit her each year and be with her for some time. Saida Auntie was related to Dr. Ali in that she was a cousin. Before bringing Imama over, Dr. Ali had told her all about Imama. Saida Auntie greeted her warmly when she came and proceeded to tell her in great detail about each and every relative present in Multan. And as if that was not enough, she even volunteered to accompany Imama to Multan and drop her off at her college, an offer that Dr. Ali refused, gently but firmly. "No, sister, that will be too much trouble," he said. "Perhaps a better idea would be for Imama to stay with one of my brothers." Saida Auntie was beginning to doubt the advantages of being in a hostel. She will be well looked after there and will have all comforts of a home life. She began to recount the many problems and discomforts Imama would have to face in a hostel. Imama was relieved and Dr. Ali remained firm in his stance regarding the hostel. Imama herself felt that was the best option. Her next meeting with Saida Auntie was in Multan in the hostel she was staying in. She had been at there for a couple of months when was told a lady had come to see her. Imama went numb with fear. Who could have come to meet her, and that too a woman? She was surprised to see Saida Auntie waiting for her in the meeting area. Saida Auntie greeted her with the same warmth and kindness she had shown her in Lahore. She was on a fortnight stay in Multan to catch up with her relatives there, and in those 2 weeks she often came to see Imama. On one occasion she even took Imama to see her brother and his family at their house. This then became the routine. Every few months Saida Auntie would visit Multan and would come and see Imama in the hostel. When Imama would go to Lahore on her monthly visit, she too would pay a visit to Saida Auntie's. If she was on a longer stay she would, on Saida Auntie's insistence, sometimes stay overnight at her place. Imama loved the old brick house Saida Auntie lived in. Without verbalizing it, the two felt at peace with each other because both suffered from the same sense of loneliness, although Saida Auntie, unlike Imama, had friends and neighbors to temporarily alleviate this feeling. Because of her own situation, Saida Auntie could empathize with Imama. Once Imama confided in her that she planned to do her M.Sc. from Lahore, Saida Auntie began persuading her to come and live with her when she returned to Lahore. It was around this time that Dr. Ali's eldest daughter shifted back to her father's house. Dr. Ali's son-in-law, who was also his nephew, was going abroad to complete his Ph.D. It was decided that for the time he would be abroad his wife and children were to stay with Dr. Ali. Although Dr. Ali's house was big enough to accommodate all, Imama felt uncomfortable staying on. In any case, she was already far too indebted to Dr. Ali for all his kindness, and she wanted to stand on her own feet as soon as it was possible. If she continued staying with Dr. Ali, he would insist on paying for her education and would probably also continue supporting her even after she started working. Living with him, she would never be able to assert herself. An independent life was the best solution, she felt. And living with Saida Auntie would suit her perfectly. Once she got a job, she would also be able to insist on paying a small rent to Saida Auntie, a thing Dr. Ali would never agree to if she continued living in his house. For Dr. Ali, her decision to move out came as a shock. "Why, Amna? Why will you not stay in my house? Saida Auntie insists I stay with her. I'll speak to her." "No, that is not it. I wish to stay with her. If I live with her she will not be so lonely. That is no reason. You can visit her every day if you like. Why must you stay there? Please, let me stay there. I will be happier doing so. I wish to start becoming independent," Imama pleaded. "I do not understand what you mean by that," Dr. Ali replied. "I do not wish to be a burden on you. As it is, I owe you so much. I don't wish to be indebted all my life." Imama's voice trailed away. She realized she had hurt Dr. Ali with her words. She regretted them. "I have never thought of you as a burden, Amna. Never. Daughters are never a burden, and for me you are my daughter. What you say has hurt me very much. I am sorry, Dad. That is not what I meant. I was just expressing my feelings. Being dependent on someone is a painful reality. Living with Saida Auntie will give me peace of mind. I'll pay for stay. That I cannot ever do with you. I owe you so much that if I were to live 10 lifetimes I would not be able to repay you for all you have done for me. But now, for now, I wish to learn how to live life on my own. Please let me do so." Dr. Ali did not insist any further. For this too Imama was grateful to him. For Imama, living with Saida Auntie was starting life all over again. This was not the same as living with Dr. Ali and his family, nor was it the same as living in the hostel. She felt a strange sense of happiness and independence for the first time in her life. Saida auntie lived by herself. She had a maid who would come in the mornings and do the housework and leave by evening. She had a large social circle and was often out meeting friends and relatives and also receiving many visitors of her own. She introduced Imama to everyone as her sister's daughter. As time passed, she began referring to her as her daughter. So while her old acquaintances knew Imama as Saida auntie's niece, her newer friends all thought she was her daughter. Nobody gave the relationship much thought. They all knew what a loving heart Saida auntie had. Her sons and their families too began to accept Imama as part of the family, and every time they called Saida auntie they would also talk to Imama. When they would come to Lahore on their annual vacation, they would treat Imama as a sister, and Imama too began to feel she was part of the family. She would often feel that she was in reality Saida auntie's daughter, a sister to her sons, and an aunt to their children. Once she completed her M.Sc. at the Punjab University, Dr. Ali helped get her a job with a pharmaceutical company. It was a good job, and for the first time in her life, Imama was financially independent. This was not the life she had lived in her parents' house, nor was this the life she had once envisaged in her dreams, but it was not also the nightmare she had feared her life would become when she had fled her home all those years ago. She could not talk to anybody about it, but she felt her life was a series of miracles. To have sought the help of a man like Salaar Sikandar, to have found sanctuary with Dr. Ali's family, to have found a new family with Saida auntie, to have completed her education, and now this job. The only regret in her life was Jalal. If she could have married him, she would have considered herself the luckiest person on earth. The 8 years that had passed since her flight from home had transformed her completely. On leaving home, she was well aware that she was losing the affection and devotion of loved ones, that she should have no expectations from anyone, that when people let her down she should not feel hurt or rejected. She had hardened in these years on her own. She no longer cried at the slightest hurt. She was no longer the Imama Hashim she had been at 20, timid and fearful. She was now more confident, more self-assured. But these years of independence had taught her caution. She was now careful in her speech and careful about how she conducted herself. She had received inestimable love from both Dr. Ali's and Saida auntie's families, and she was very careful not to say or do anything that would upset them or cause them to scorn her. This is something she had never had to do living with her own family. Being discreet and tactful was a new trait she had learnt. The day Saida auntie disappeared, Imama was at work. The house was locked when she got home. This was not worrying, since Saida auntie, being as social as she was, often out visiting when she got home. Imama unlocked the door and went in. This was around 4 in the evening. But when the late evening call for prayers was sounded from the mosque, Imama began to worry. It was Saida auntie's habit to come home by sundown. Imama went to the neighbor's house to inquire. She was told the neighbor's son had accompanied Saida auntie to Bilal's house. Since Imama was well acquainted with Bilal's family, she rang them up to ask about Saida auntie. She was told that Saida auntie had come, but that she had left around noon. She rang up all her neighbors and friends to find out where she could be. She drew a blank everywhere. Now she was really worried. She rang up Dr. Ali and told him that Saida auntie was missing. What really caused her worry was that Saida auntie was completely unfamiliar with the city. She was used to her own neighborhood and the confines of the inner city, but once out of familiar surroundings, she was lost. If she wanted to go outside her neighborhood, she would ask either one of the neighborhood boys or Imama to take her. Salaar, on the other hand, knew the entire city of Lahore with the exception of the inner city. Had he even some idea of the inner city, he would have been able to help Saida auntie home despite her vague directions. It was late in the night when Dr. Ali rang up Imama to tell her that Saida auntie had been traced through an acquaintance and that she would be home soon. Imama breathed a sigh of relief. An hour later, when the bell rang, Imama went rushing to the door. She opened the door. A good-looking man greeted her and, turning around, said goodbye to Saida auntie, who was standing behind him. She hardly noticed the other tall man, with his back to her. The two men walked away as Imama hugged Saida auntie fervently. The next few days Saida auntie spoke often of the two young men who had come to her aid, Furqan and Salaar. Imama did not connect Salaar with Salaar Sikandar. Dead men do not come back. In any case, Salaar Sikandar was not the type to aid anyone, nor did he have any of those glowing qualities that Saida Auntie was so enthusiastically extolling. A few days later Furkan came with his wife to visit Saida Auntie. Imama got to meet him for the first time. She liked both Furkan and his wife. Over the next few months the two would often come over and they became quite good friends. It was now 2 years since Imama had been working. Perhaps life would have continued like this, had she not one day passed a street on which Dr. Jalal had built his hospital. His name was emblazoned on the outside. Imama stopped involuntarily. She stood there for a while looking at his name, then she determinedly walked away. She promised herself that she would never come down this street again. Jalal was married, that she had learnt when she left her house. She did not want to ever be a part of his life again. But as fate would have it, this decision was not to be a lasting one. A fortnight later she bumped into Rabia while at work. Rabia was there on an errand. Seeing her standing before her, Imama fell into confusion. She did not know whether to greet her or not. Rabia solved her problem. Embracing her warmly she said, "Imama, where have you been? Your disappearance created quite a stir both in the college and in the hostel." Imama smiled weakly. "I left home, why I did so must be known to you." Imama did not wish to elaborate. "Yes, I have an idea why you left, but I have not discussed it with anyone. We really got into trouble when you disappeared. Me, Javeria, Zainab, the police really grilled us, but we had no idea where you were. There were many rumors though about you and much gossip in the hostel and the college." Rabia rambled on, sitting in the chair in front of her. "Did you go alone?" she asked suddenly. "Yes." Imama switched on the intercom to ask for tea. "But where did you go?" "Nowhere. I was here in Lahore." "But tell me more about yourself, and Javeria, and the rest." Imama was eager to turn the conversation away from herself. "I have my practice here in Lahore, Javeria is in Islamabad. She is working there. She is married to a doctor. I got married to Farouk. You remember Farouk? He was in our college." Imama smiled. "And Zainab?" Her heart began to beat fast. "Zainab is in London these days, doing her residency with her husband. My husband Farouk has his practice in her brother's hospital." "In Jalal's hospital?" Imama could not stop herself from asking. "Yes. In Jalal's hospital. Jalal set up his hospital after completing his specialization. He is such a nice person, but unfortunately he has his troubles. He got divorced recently." "Divorced? Why?" "I don't know why. Farouk did ask him, but he only said that he and his wife could not develop an understanding with each other. She was very nice too, a doctor. We got very friendly with them and would often go to their house. I could never have imagined there was any friction between the two of them. He has a 3-year-old son who stays with him. His wife has gone back to the US." Changing the subject in the same breath, she continued, "But now tell me about yourself. I can see you work here, but what about your studies? Did you complete your degree?" "I did my master's in chemistry." "So, are you married?" "No, not yet." "And your parents? Have you patched up with your parents yet?" "No," Imama spoke in a soft voice. Rabia sat for a little more and then left. For Imama the rest of the day was tedious. She could not stop thinking of Jalal. She had never really forgotten him, it was just wishful thinking. She could not really put him out of her life. Today she once again realized how much she really cared for him. She had put him out of her life only because she did not wish to cause any complications in his life, nor did she want to be a source of trouble in his marital affairs. Now, he was single again. She thought of her life those 8 years ago when she had cried like a baby because she could not marry Jalal. There were too many obstacles in the way, hurdles that she could not overcome and obstacles that Jalal had no power to remove. Now, time had intervened. Those barriers no longer existed. That he had been married and was now divorced was of no concern to her, nor the fact that he had a 3-year-old son. "I should go and see him," she resolved. Perhaps he still thinks about me. Perhaps he has recognized his error. Imama was ready to forgive him for the hurt he had caused her the last time they had talked on the phone. Anybody would have done the same. After all, one does not risk everything for the sake of a girl. He had his career to think of, and his parents who had so many hopes and dreams associated with him. How could he have abandoned all? Like me, he too was helpless, she reasoned to herself. The sharpness of his words those many years ago was forgotten now. They did not cause her to pause and rethink her decision to go see Jalal. I should go and see him. Perhaps Allah is giving me another chance. Perhaps all my prayers are finally being answered. Perhaps Allah has had pity on me now. Otherwise, why would Rabia have popped up in my life so suddenly now? Why would I have found out that he is now divorced? Perhaps, if I were to meet him again, she had made up her mind. She was going to meet Jalal. I wished to see Dr. Jalal, she said to the receptionist. Do you have an appointment? The receptionist asked. No. Then I am afraid you cannot see him. Dr. Jalal does not meet patients without an appointment. The receptionist was dismissive. I am not a patient. I am a friend. Imama spoke softly, putting both hands on the receptionist's desk. Does Dr. Jalal know you were coming to see him? No. Let me just ask him then, the receptionist said, picking up the phone. Your name, please. When Imama did not reply, she repeated her question. Can I have your name, please? Imama Hashim. Imama could not recall the last time she had said her name aloud. Sir, there is a Imama Hashim to see you, the receptionist spoke on the intercom. Then turning to Imama with a smile she said, you are to go in. A patient was just leaving the doctor's room. Imama walked in. Jalal was standing behind the desk, astonishment writ large over his face. She could feel her heart beat in her ears. It had been more than 8 years since the two had met, when exactly she could not recall. Imama, what a pleasant surprise. Jalal greeted her warmly, coming forward to meet her. I can hardly believe it. How are you? I am well. And you? She was staring at him, at the face she had been unable to forget in 8 years. She was listening to the voice she had not forgotten in 8 years. I am just fine, he said, indicating the chair in front of his desk, asking her to be seated. He went and sat behind the table. She had always known that meeting Jalal again would be a cause of great happiness, but this excitement that she felt, she had not anticipated it would be thus. What will you have? Tea? Coffee? A soft drink, he was asking. Whatever you wish. Right then, we will have coffee. You always liked it. He spoke to the receptionist to ask her to send out for some coffee. Imama saw the changes wrought in him through the years. He no longer sprouted a beard, his hairstyle changed, and he had put on some weight. On the whole, he looked far more confident and self-contained than he had before. So what are you doing nowadays? He asked, putting down the receiver. I work in a pharmaceutical company. Did you complete your medical studies? He inquired. No. I did an MSc in chemistry. Which company are you working for? She told him. That is a very good firm. He spent the next few minutes praising the company. She watched him intently. I went abroad to specialize. He was now telling her about himself. She sat quite happy just to be looking at him. Sometimes it is enough for a person to just be there, she was thinking to herself. It has been a year since I started this hospital and I have a good practice going. He was still talking when the coffee was brought in. How did you find out about me? He asked, picking up the cup of coffee. I saw your name outside on the panel of doctors. And then Rabia also told me. You know Rabia? Zainab knows her well. Rabia Farouk? Yes, I know her well. Her husband Dr. Farouk is my colleague here. Yes, so I came. Imama had not yet touched the coffee. It was still too hot for her liking. She watched Jalal, the man she had once idealized. She believed he had all those qualities that a man should have, all those qualities that she would want in a husband. She was sure he was the same man still. That he did not have a beard could not mean that he did not revere the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, as much as he had before. He was still singing praises of his hospital, and Imama could recall the voice that had so many years before made a difficult decision easy for her. She was happy to hear him talk of his success. It was for this very reason he had rejected her 8.5 years ago. Now he had achieved all his desires. There should be no more obstacles to his marrying her now. There should be no difficulty now. Are you married? He had suddenly changed the topic of conversation. No, Imama replied softly. So where do you stay? Are you with your parents? Imama could now sense the concern in his voice. No. Then where? I live on my own. How could I return to my parents? She was still speaking very softly. And what about you? She continued, are you married? I was. I am divorced now. I have a 3-year-old son. He lives with me. Jalal's tone betrayed no emotion. I am sorry to hear that, Imama commiserated. Don't be. It is a good thing it ended. It was not a marriage, it was a mess. Jalal put the coffee cup back on the table. For a time silence engulfed the room. Many years ago I had asked you to marry me, Imama broke the silence at last. Jalal looked at her without saying anything. I had then requested you to marry me. Can I make that request again? She looked at him as his face changed color. Circumstances have changed since then. You are no longer dependent on your parents, they cannot object to your marrying of your own free will, nor can my parents interfere in any way. Imama stopped to wait for Jalal to answer. There was no reply. The silence stretched on, straining her nerves. Perhaps he is worried I might object to his son living with us. She tried to rationalize his lack of response. I should clarify that I have nothing against his first marriage nor having his son with us. Jalal, I have no problems with. This is not possible, Imama, Jalal cut her short. Why is it not possible? Don't you love me? This has nothing to do with love, Imama. Much time has passed. In any case, I do not wish to marry again so soon after the failure of my first marriage. I want to concentrate on my career. Jalal, you should have no concerns about our marriage failing, you know I will not let that happen. Still, I do not wish to risk it. Jalal was curt. I can wait, it will be of no use, Imama, Jalal said with a deep sigh. I am not in a position to be able to marry you. She looked at him sadly. I married of my own free will last time. It was a failure. I do not wish to make the same mistake twice. This time I will marry wherever my parents tell me to. Then tell your parents of me. Perhaps they will approve, Imama spoke with a sinking feeling in her heart. No. I cannot tell them. Look, Imama, there are some realities both you and I must face. I respect your feelings towards me, and I will admit that there was a time when I was interested in you. Or, to put it more correctly, I was in love with you. Even today you have a special place in my heart and you will always have that place in my heart. But Imama, life is not based on emotions alone. He stopped speaking for a moment. Imama watched his face through the haze of the smoke steaming from the cup of coffee. Those many years ago I had begged you not to leave your house. You did not listen to me. You did as you pleased. Instead of trying to convince your parents to allow you to marry me, you put pressure on me to marry you on the sly. I could not have done that, nor would it have been the right thing to have done. Religion was one factor, but it is not the only factor. We cannot discount the society we live in and the obligations social life puts on us. Imama could not believe it that Jalal should be saying these things to her. You disappeared, but do you have any idea of the scandal you created by your action? Your parents were careful to not allow the news to reach the press, but everyone in the college knew about your disappearance nevertheless. The police carried on a thorough investigation and questioned most of your friends. Zainab too was interrogated. Luckily we came out unscathed. He got up in agitation. I have worked hard to reach where I am now. I am not brave enough to marry you and have people pointing fingers at me. I move in the community of doctors, and marrying Imama Hashim will mean reopening the scandal that rocked the medical community 8 years ago. If I marry you, I will have to avoid everyone. Where were you all these years? How did you live? These are pertinent questions. My parents will not believe what you say, and I have my reputation to safeguard. You may be a very nice girl, but you have a sullied reputation. I cannot marry a girl with a tarnished reputation. I will not have people say my wife is a woman of ill repute. I am sorry, Imama, I hope you can understand my position. The coffee in the cup had turned cold. There was no more smoke through which she could view Jalal's face, yet his face was clouded as if behind a smokescreen, or perhaps it was her eyes misting over that caused Jalal's face to cloud over and disappear. Holding the arm rests with both hands, Imama forced herself to get up. Yes, I understand. Goodbye, she said, leaving the room. I am sorry, Imama, Jalal was trying to apologize. Without looking at him, Imama left the room. It was past 7 in the evening. Darkness had fallen. The street lights were on and neon signs flashed their advertisements. The traffic on the street was heavy. This was a street that had clinics and hospitals on both sides. She recalled the time when she had hoped to have her own clinic on this road, to have her name precede her qualifications on hospital boards, like Jalal's, like so many others on this road. All was possible, all had been possible, all was within her grip had she not left her house 8 years ago. For long she stood outside the hospital watching the flowing traffic, her mind a blank. She could not think clearly. What should be her next step? She turned around to face the hospital again. She saw the flashing neon sign advertising Dr. Jalal's name in the center of the building's facade. You may be a very nice girl, but you have a sullied reputation. Jalal's words rang in her ears. For the first time she realized that she had lived her life in an illusion. Her love for Jalal had been one-sided. Jalal had never loved her, not 8.5 years ago, not now. He had needed her, he had needed all the things she could have given him, her family background, the position and influence her family had in society, the connections, and the wealth, all he would have achieved overnight had he been able to marry her. In one leap he would have crossed the borders to mingle with the elite in the city. And she had been living with the illusion that he was in love with her. She did not expect him to cast aspersions on her character. She was so sure that he would believe that whatever she did, she would not choose the wrong path, but again she was wrong in her assumption. For him she was a girl with a sullied reputation, one for whom he had no words to defend her in front of his family and friends. When she left her home 8.5 years ago, she knew that people would cast aspersions on her character. She knew she was choosing a path that would be thorn-strewn, that would be full of poisonous tongues and sarcastic looks, but she had never imagined that Jalal would have been one of those accusing her. She would not defend herself before Jalal or present proof of her innocence. How could she? His words had for the first time in 8.5 years truthfully turned her into an outcast. He had thrown her out onto the burning sands of the desert. So this is what you are, Imama Hashim. A stigmatized woman of ill repute. What illusions did you have of yourself? Slowly she began to walk down the road, reading each hoarding, each neon sign. She knew many of the names here. Some were her classmates, others her juniors, and some her seniors. And where was she? Nowhere. Wait and see, Imama, what will become of you. You will get nothing, you will gain naught, her father, Hashim Mubin, had warned her. She felt tears carousing down her cheeks. The bright lights were beginning to hurt her eyes. Jalal was not a bad man, but he was not she had thought him to be. He was not that which had attracted him to her. What an illusion she had been living in, despite the fact that she had her eyes opened wide. He had a materialistic outlook, completely materialistic. But this was the first time she had realized it. He was not a bad man, that was simply his outlook, and he lived by those rules. Today he had just exposed his outlook to her. For the first time since she left her home had she faced such humiliation and mortification, and that too from the one she had idealized. And what was she in the eyes of that model of perfection? A girl who had fled from home, a woman of ill repute. It was a flood of tears that was pouring from her eyes, and that flood was washing everything away. Everything. Severely she rubbed her eyes dry with her hands and then wiped her tear-drenched face with the end of her dupatta. She hailed a passing rickshaw and got in. Saida Auntie opened the door. She ducked in quickly so that Saida Auntie should not see her tear-stained face. Where were you, Imama? It is so late. I have been worried. I was just about to go next door to ask the neighbor's boy to go to your office and find your whereabouts, Saida Auntie said, shutting the door and following her to her room. Nowhere, Mom. There was work at the office and so I got delayed. Imama replied without looking back. You have never been late at the office before, so what happened today that makes you come home so late in the night? What was the work that delayed you so late in the night? Saida Auntie was not satisfied with Imama's explanation. What can I say to that, Mom? I'll be careful not to be so late again, Imama replied, still keeping her face averted. She moved towards her room. Should I heat the food or do you want to eat later? I don't wish to eat now, Mom. I have a headache, I want to sleep for a while. Why is your head hurting? Saida Auntie followed her into the room, really worried now. Shall I get you some medicine? Or make you some tea? Mom. Please let me sleep. I don't need anything, if I do I will ask you for it. Imama did have a splitting headache by now. Saida Auntie finally realized her concern was only causing Imama more trauma. Very well, you rest then, she said as she turned to leave. Without switching on the light, Imama shut the door to her room. Pulling the blanket on her, she lay down on her bed and covered her eyes with the crook of her arm. She wanted to sleep. She did not wish to recall her conversation with Jalal, nor did she wish to think of aught else. She did not want to cry. She did not want to think about her future prospects. She only wanted to sleep. Her wish was granted. She did not know when or how, but soon she was in a deep sleep. End of chapter 9.